She crashed her car on a remote road in the middle of nowhere. A kind stranger stopped and asked if she needed help. She said she was fine. He drove home and called the police, just to be safe. Officers arrived in under 10 minutes. She was gone. No footprints in the snow, no phone calls, no witnesses, just a locked car, a spilled bottle of wine, and silence. And in over 20 years of searching, investigators have found absolutely nothing. No body, no confirmed sightings, no answers. Just a question that has haunted this country for 2 decades. What really happened to Maura Murray? Because here's what makes this case different from every other missing persons case you've ever heard about. Everything about that night suggests she couldn't have just walked away. But she did. And no one, not the FBI, not local police, not the thousands of amateur investigators who have dedicated years of their lives to this case, has been able to explain how. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand why this case is so deeply unsettling, and why, after all this time, it still doesn't have an ending. To understand what happened on that frozen New Hampshire road, you first need to understand who Maura Murray was, because she wasn't just a statistic. She wasn't just a name on a missing persons flyer. She was a real person with a real life. And understanding that life is the only way to even begin making sense of what she may have been running from. Maura Murray was 21 years old. She was a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and by most accounts, she was good at it. Focused. Determined. The kind of student who showed up, did the work, and didn't make excuses. Before college, Maura had been an athlete, a competitive runner in high school. She had the kind of discipline that most people her age didn't. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't careless. She was the kind of person who had a plan. To her friends, she seemed normal. To her family, she was a source of pride. On the surface, Maura Murray had everything going for her. But surfaces can be deceiving, because beneath that composed exterior, something was quietly unraveling in the weeks before she disappeared. There were signs, small, strange, easy to dismiss in the moment, that, in hindsight, paint a picture of a young woman who was deeply troubled. A young woman who may have been preparing to leave everything behind. Let's go back to the days immediately before February 9th, 2004. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, people close to Maura noticed she hadn't been herself. She seemed distant, preoccupied, like something was weighing on her that she wasn't ready to talk about. And then came the breakdown. At work, just days before she disappeared, Maura completely fell apart. Her supervisor watched as she became increasingly emotional until she was barely holding herself together. And in the middle of it all, she kept repeating the same 2 words, over and over again. My sister. My sister. When her family was later contacted and asked about it, they were confused. There was no crisis involving her sister, no emergency, no reason Maura should have been that distraught. No one could explain it. Then on February 9th, 2004, the day she disappeared, Maura made a series of decisions that, looking back, feel less like a normal Tuesday and more like someone quietly closing the doors of their old life. First, she emailed her professors. She told them she'd be absent for a week due to a family emergency, and that she had already made arrangements to make up the work. There was no family emergency. She then went to an ATM and withdrew $280 in cash, nearly every dollar she had in her account. Next, she stopped at a liquor store. She bought wine, vodka, and a few other bottles. Not a casual purchase, a deliberate one. And then she went back to her dorm, packed a bag with some of her belongings, got into her car, and started driving north. She didn't call anyone. She didn't text anyone. She didn't tell a single person where she was going or when she'd be back. She just left. And no one who knew her had any idea. Maura drove north for several hours. Where exactly she was headed, if she even had a destination, has never been confirmed. At approximately 7:27 p.m. on a winding stretch of Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, her car drifted into a sharp curve and crashed. The area was rural, dark. The temperature had already dropped well below freezing. There were no streetlights. There were almost no other cars. It was not the kind of road where you wanted to break down. A few minutes after the crash, a local man named Butch Atwood came driving by. He was a school bus driver, a familiar face in the area, and when he saw the wrecked car on the side of the road, he pulled over without hesitation. He walked up to the driver's window and asked if the young woman inside was okay. She told him she was fine. She said she had already called for roadside assistance and that help was on the way. Atwood was skeptical. Something felt off. But she seemed calm, and she was insistent, so he got back in his vehicle. He drove a short distance to his home, close enough that he could still see the crash site, and called the police, just to be sure. The call went through. Officers were dispatched immediately, and here is where this story stops making sense. From the moment Butch Atwood called police to the moment officers arrived on scene, somewhere between 7 and 10 minutes passed. 7 to 10 minutes. When they pulled up to the crash site, the car was there. The wreckage was there. Maura Murray was not. What investigators found, and didn't find, at that crash site, is the reason this case has never let go of the people who've studied it. The car was locked, not abandoned in a panic, but deliberately locked. Inside, they found alcohol. Some of the bottles had been opened. Some of the contents had spilled across the seats. Her phone was still there, her makeup, her clothes, the personal items she had packed from her dorm room. Everything was exactly where it should be, except the person those things belonged to. Police immediately began searching the surrounding area. They fanned out along the road. They pushed into the tree line. They called her name into the dark. They brought in search dogs, trained animals that can track a human scent across miles of rough terrain. Nothing. And then one of the officers noticed something that would become the most haunting detail of the entire investigation. There were no footprints in the snow, not leading into the woods, not along the shoulder of the road, not in any direction. The snow around that car was undisturbed. Think about what that means. If Maura had walked away from the crash in any direction, she would have left tracks. You can't walk through fresh snow without leaving a trail. It's not possible. But there were none. Which means one of two things. Either the snow fell or was disturbed in a way that covered her tracks, which investigators say is not consistent with the conditions that night. Or Maura Murray did not walk away from that crash at all. She left some other way. And someone may know exactly how. In the 2 decades since Maura's disappearance, this case has attracted the attention of investigators, journalists, documentary filmmakers, and one of the most dedicated online communities in true crime history. Books have been written. A podcast has logged hundreds of episodes. Families have demanded answers. And yet, it comes down to 3 possible explanations. None of them are clean. All of them are deeply disturbing. Theory 1. The cash withdrawal. The false email to her professors. The packed bag. The solo drive with no stated destination. To many people, this is the clearest picture. A young woman who had quietly reached her breaking point and decided to vanish on her own terms. Maybe the stress had become too much. Maybe there was something in her life, something private, something painful, that she simply couldn't face anymore. And maybe that night, she made the decision to start over. It's not an impossible theory. People do disappear voluntarily. It happens more than most of us realize. But here's the problem. If you were planning to walk away from your life forever, you would take the things you need. You'd take your phone. You'd take your bank cards. You'd take the belongings that matter most to you. Maura left all of it behind. That's not the behavior of someone executing a plan. That looks more like someone who never expected to be gone this long. Theory 2. This is the theory that law enforcement has quietly leaned toward, at least in the early years of the investigation. The idea is simple. Maura had been drinking. She was scared. She knew the police were coming, and she panicked, so she ran into the woods to hide. And the cold killed her before she could find her way back. Hypothermia is a brutal and fast-moving killer. In sub-freezing temperatures, confusion sets in within minutes. Disorientation follows. People who die of hypothermia are often found miles from where they were last seen, having wandered in circles without realizing it. It's a plausible explanation. But it still doesn't answer the question of the footprints. If she ran into those woods, there should have been tracks. There weren't. And in all the years of searching that wilderness, by trained professionals, by search and rescue teams, by volunteers, no remains have ever been found. Theory 3. This is the theory that keeps people up at night. Between the time Butch Atwood called police and the time officers arrived, there was a window. 7 to 10 minutes on a dark road in rural New Hampshire. A car could have come down that road. It could have slowed. It could have stopped. A young woman, visibly shaken, possibly drinking, standing alone in freezing temperatures on an empty road at night, is exactly the kind of person a predator looks for. Vulnerable, isolated, unlikely to be missed immediately. If someone stopped and offered her a ride, and she accepted because she was desperate to get away before the police arrived, she may have stepped into something far worse than a traffic stop. And if someone stopped, and she didn't have a choice in the matter, then whoever was driving that car has lived with that secret for 22 years, and they have never said a word. More than 2 decades have passed since that night on Route 112. Her family has never stopped searching. Investigators have never officially closed the case. The online communities dedicated to finding answers are still active today, still turning over every stone, still chasing every lead. And still, nothing. No body, no confirmed sightings, no final, definitive explanation for how a 21-year-old woman disappeared from a crash site in under 10 minutes without leaving a single footprint in the snow. Just an unanswered question that has haunted everyone who has ever looked closely at this case. What really happened to Maura Murray? Did she choose to vanish? Did the cold take her? Or did someone driving down that empty road that night make a decision that changed everything? Until someone comes forward with the truth, and after 22 years that feels less and less likely, the disappearance of Maura Murray remains one of the most chilling and unresolved mysteries in American history. And the road where she was last seen, it's still there, dark, quiet, exactly as it was that night, waiting for an answer that may never come. If this case got under your skin, hit subscribe. Every week we cover the stories that don't have clean endings. And drop a comment below. Which theory do you believe? I read every single one,